your moderator for today's webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to go over before we get started. First, we will have this webinar recorded, and it will be available beginning tomorrow morning on the LiveWell Colorado website. To access the recording, simply visit livewellcolorado.org, click on LiveWell's Commitment tab, click on Research and Publications, and select Webinars. Second, we will have some time for Q&A at the end of this webinar. If possible, please type your question into the question box on your control panel, and please let us know who your question is directed to. And now I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Lisa Walvoord.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We're really excited to share with you some of the hard work that has been done by the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council, really over the, I think it's the culmination of about 3 years worth of work at this point. Great. One of the things I want to reinforce the message from Kate that we will have a Q&A session. So please, as we go along, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them as we go. Indicating who you would like to respond to them is always helpful. So we appreciate that. And we will provide you with contact information for all of our speakers as well as links to the materials we talk about. So I'm sure some of you scurried to write down the URL that Kate provided for the recording, but we will also send that to you as a link so everyone can share this around. Our objectives for today's call are first to discuss updates on the work of the COFSAC, or Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council. And we are thrilled to share with you two key issues to advancing food system issues in Colorado in the form of these issue briefs, and then share with you some of the next steps for the Food Systems Advisory Council moving forward and how you can more actively engage in that work. So first we'll have Ron Carleton, who is with the Colorado Department of Agriculture, will provide his own welcome and some background on the council. And then we have presentations on the two issue briefs. The first is SNAP, or formerly known as food stamps at farmers markets, and the second is around direct market technical assistance. Then we'll have a few closing thoughts and again open it up for Q&A. So we found that the greatest value in these calls comes when we get great questions from the audience, so I'm going to keep prodding all of you to do not be shy about asking your questions. So our presenters today, as I mentioned, we've got Julie Kerksick from the Department of Human Services, Don Thillmany from CSU Extension, and Ron Carleton from the Department of Agriculture. And before I hand it over to Ron, just a little bit about why LiveWell Colorado cares about this. We initiated legislation to create the Food Systems Advisory Council several years ago as a tool to help increase access to healthy food for all Coloradans. LiveWell Colorado is a statewide organization that is focused on obesity prevention, and we see obesity is not just an issue of individual choice and individual behaviors, but about having environments where people can make those choices. So the Food System Advisory Council is very important for ensuring that those choices are available to all Coloradans, with a particular emphasis on those who may be challenged for a number of reasons, and ensuring that there is truly equitable access. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Ron Carleton. Ron has been the Deputy Commissioner of the Colorado Department of Agriculture since June of 2012. He's had some pretty interesting challenges during that time. Not only has he assumed responsibility for the Food Systems Advisory Council, he has had to address both drought and flooding issues, farm bill policies that we still can't pass, industrial hemp, the Colorado State Fair, and he served on the Amendment 64 Implementation Task Force. So he's had some fun. Prior to that, he had over 30 years in the U.S. Congress as a legislative assistant and legislative director, most recently as the chief of staff to then Colorado Congressman John Salazar, where he was integrally involved in developing and guiding agriculture policy. So with that, I'm thrilled to hand it over to Ron.
Thank you, Lisa, and I want to welcome all of our participants today for what we hope will be a very interesting discussion about the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council and what we do and what we're planning for in the future. First, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the Food Systems Advisory Council. As Lisa indicated, we were created in 2010 by the Colorado State Legislature, and Lisa and LiveWell were a very important part of that process in helping get this off the ground and making sure that there was some sort of a state entity that was looking at these food system issues. It is a volunteer-based membership, 15 members representing state agencies and a diverse group of food system stakeholders. And I'll have a little bit more to say about the membership in just a moment. The first meeting was held in January of 2011, and during the first couple of years, the Food Systems Advisory Council met quarterly, and they've held listening sessions around the state, and they've met with and heard from a variety of stakeholders about issues related to food systems and helping to provide fresh fruits and vegetables to all Coloradans. Recently, we went through the sunset review process, and during this 2013 legislative session, and the state legislature agreed to continue the Food Systems Advisory Council through 2018. So where the original term was 3 years, they've now extended us for another 5 years, and we're very appreciative of that. Now, there's a legislative mandate, but I think that the charge that we as a Food Systems Advisory Council have really boils down to advance recommendations that strengthen healthy food access for all Coloradans through Colorado agriculture and local food systems and economies. Well, what exactly does this mean? And this is something that over the last year, as we went through the sunset review process, we had numerous discussions, not only amongst ourselves within the council, but also with the state legislature. There were a number of legislators who took an interest in what we were doing, where we've been, but also where we needed to go. And really, with a lot of their direction, I think that what they want us to do is working with stakeholders around the state, various food groups and coalitions and others, to help identify issues and bring those issues to the legislature. Those issues could involve barriers to access to fresh and healthy foods, or it could be identifying better ways to facilitate the provision of fresh and healthy foods to all Coloradans. And within the council, we had to think a little bit about how best to do that. And it was clear, again, from our conversations and our work with the legislature that they were looking for advice. We are an advisory council, and I think they wanted us to bring to them ideas, recommendations, issues, things to help begin a dialogue, as it were, things that we felt they needed to consider and needed to take a look at with regard to food access in Colorado. So that's kind of where we are and where we're headed, and we're going to talk a little bit more in just a moment about really the first fruits of our efforts which are issue briefs and how we got there and why we're doing those. But let me talk a little bit more about the council. The seats that we have on the council represent anti-hunger and food assistance groups, agricultural production. We have state agencies that are represented, food wholesale, retail, nutrition and health, academic representation, as well as extension services. Now, we have a great website, which I encourage everyone to visit at some point. We try to keep it updated with some good information, with reports that we produce, and our issue briefs. It's at www.cofoodsystemscouncil.org, which should be there on your screen. Among other things, you can go to our website. If you scroll down near the bottom of the page, you will see copies of the two issue briefs that we're going to talk about today. So again, I encourage you to go to our website for updates, meeting dates, and a variety of information, and also includes things like directories of food coalitions and groups across the state. So hopefully you can do that. Now let me go to the question of our issue briefs. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we had conversations both with our legislators and amongst ourselves and others around the state as to how could we best advise the state legislature with regard to food issues. What could we do to bring these issues to them? And after a number of discussions, the idea of issue briefs were considered and agreed upon. The idea was that through issue briefs we could identify relevant issues that have been brought to us by groups around the state that are important, again, either as barriers or ways to facilitate greater access. And through these issue briefs we could discuss the issue, identify key parts of the issue, and then come up with some recommendations, some ideas that we could then take to the legislature. Not only the legislature, but in some cases to enter into a dialogue with the relevant state agencies that might be implicated by the issue. The purpose of the issue briefs aren't necessarily to provide the definitive solution or recommendation to the problem, but really to initiate a dialogue with the state legislature and or the relevant agencies or other groups to get that dialogue started about what we have found, why we consider it to be an issue, and what reasonable steps can we take going forward with those. So that is what we're doing with the issue briefs. And again, today we're going to talk about the first two that we've produced. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lisa to introduce our next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Ron. I don't think I have anything that I need to add on there. Such a competent chair that we have. We're very fortunate. Next up, we have Julie Kerksick, who is the Director of the Office of Economic Security at the Colorado Department of Human Services. And Julie's been an amazing member of this team representing a state agency where she's really figured out how to bring other people from her team on board to the issues and engage with some other nonprofits and associations. And through that, we really arrived at this issue brief, was really through a lot of that engagement that she was a part of. She has spent her entire professional career working with and on behalf of the unemployed and low-income workers by helping to design public policy and sharing in the responsibility of translating those policies into operating programs and procedures. So we've been very fortunate to have her skills and expertise around the table. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie, who's going to talk about the first of the briefs.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be part of this effort. And I will be talking about how we are working to increase SNAP at farmers markets. As we were talking about earlier, issue briefs are both educational tools, but they are also meant to really stimulate discussion and then we hope some action. So we're excited about this one. This one, also I want to just mention before we go any further, was really triggered, the catalyst for our getting involved in this issue are two former members of our Food Systems Advisory Council, Cindy Torres and Ruth Stemler. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge those individuals and their efforts, their organizations as well. Cindy was with the Colorado Farmers Market Association, and so they have been just absolutely critical partners for us. One of the, well, all right, so as we got going with this topic, when I came into Colorado, into this job about 2.5 years ago, one of the things that my boss, who is the executive director of the Department of Human Services, asked of me was to represent him on the Colorado Food System Advisory Council. In my office are programs that provide economic assistance, and that includes the SNAP program, food assistance. At the time, I wasn't really sure how I could contribute or make sense of all of this. But we quickly found out, and I think this is a lesson worth taking your time to think about, that a lot of times when we have a lot of good policies, we have good ideas, we don't always have the time or wherewithal or connections to actually implement them well. And especially when you're dealing with larger bureaucracies, I think it's important to think about how often things can get bottled up, just snagged, and then never get set right again. So this brief is in part about policies that are already there and how we are trying to make those policies come to life. So again, that's the context. As I think probably everybody on this call knows, the SNAP Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly food stamps, play a critical role in meeting food needs of low-income Coloradans. If you can go to the next sheet. So on here are a lot of different facts about SNAP and SNAP's effect on our local state economy. We talk about on here that there are, in fiscal year 2012, $809 million in federal SNAP dollars were distributed in Colorado. That has a multiplier effect, upwards of $9 for every dollar of SNAP. But just to take this very recently, when the federal government went through its partial shutdown last fall, we had to prepare ourselves and county partners and our participants for the possibility that we would not be able to pay our November SNAP benefits. When I started talking to people about what that would mean, literally $68 million in 1 month would not go out into our economy. So even that $809 million, number doesn't reflect how this program is continuing to grow and is needed. Even as we come out of the recession, this is a critical piece of our safety net. The lowest income Coloradans' economic fortunes tend to lag recoveries. So we know that these dollars are critical not only for the unmet food needs, but frankly for our state and for the retailers and the farmers who ultimately get paid in exchange for their food. In the local economy, farmers markets are just one piece of that puzzle, that market. But those markets are where we hope our future is, because those markets, research has shown, tend to encourage people to actually consume more fruits and vegetables. And as we all know, that's a good thing, and that's one of the things that we're really trying to make sure that we do. Secondly, in USDA research, approximately 20 cents for every SNAP dollar spent in a community goes to a farmer. But obviously, if you're talking a farmer's market, then 100% of that dollar will go to farmers. And again, that's an important way of supporting our local agriculture. So these are good ideas, but by and large, there have been two reasons why this has been slow going over time. The first was that farmers markets are not structured the way usual retail stores are. Grocery stores are, the ways to become a validated vendor is well understood, and the application is actually designed for that end user in mind. What we found is that, first of all, even when we went out and there were farmers markets led by our local Colorado Farmers Market Association that wanted to make SNAP available, to have markets accept SNAP, electronic benefit transfer cards. What they found was that, number one, markets didn't have any idea how to do that. By and large, not all, but a lot of markets just use cash, right? They don't necessarily handle cards. So there was the issue of, number one, understanding what the federal requirements were to be approved as a vendor. Number two, then getting equipment, which, again, a lot of these markets operate on very narrow margins, and even relatively small investments in equipment are sometimes the difference between doing it and not doing it. And then thirdly, they we also found that once people were doing it, that they were finding that the process to get approved was more time-consuming and complicated than was worth it to some of the vendors. I will talk a little bit about how through the Food System Advisory Council, the state has figured out some things that we could do to help address these issues. But the second big area, of course, that is an objection, if you will, is that consumers, on the consumer side, they feel that, frankly, that they can get cheaper produce if they go to their local Safeway or King Soopers. So, and I'll talk a little bit about how markets are addressing that as well. So in the first area, well before my tenure, back in 2007, Food and Nutrition Services did allow, they did understand that if they wanted fresh food and fruits and vegetables to be more available through markets, that they would help subsidize the cost of the equipment. That started, and there's a wonderful Colorado success story that dates to that time, the Colorado, the Greeley Farmers Market. They also started a grant. The officials there were so excited about the fact that they were improving their SNAP participation at farmers markets that they then secured a grant to implement a double value coupon, providing a match for SNAP clients for up to $20 of fresh produce. So as you see, that those kinds of programs then start to address the consumer concern that they can get more for their money if they just go to the regular grocery store. In the last year, what we did was we used, through the advisory council, again, these connections would not have been made, or they had not been made up until then, until we were all sitting around the table working on these issues. We were then able to put some of our state staff in touch with the Cindy and the Farmer Market Association and then individual markets and vendors to start providing technical assistance. We got the federal regional folks involved, and they have now started doing, along with state workers, certification workshops that have gotten us approximately 100 more vendors in the last season, which is just incredibly exciting. The Food and Nutrition Services has contracted with an organization that's going to help with certification going forward. The funding to pay for the equipment has been extended. And next, we've learned that we need to start our sign-up efforts with markets and vendors prior to the start of the season. And then finally, our state program is going to continue to support replacement of retired equipment through the payment of costs. So I don't want to yammer on too much. I guess the big points I want to make here are that farmers markets are an important piece of the nutritional puzzle, particularly for low-income Coloradans. We, as with many good ideas or policies, we learned that just putting a few things in place was not sufficient. We needed people to go out there and try things and then hear feedback from both consumers and the vendors about what was complicated or what was confusing or what was not working. I didn't mention this, but I should have, that one of the concerns from some of the vendors was that they were not comfortable providing some of the information asked for in the application. So being able to talk them through why that information was needed, how it would be protected, those are the kinds of things where you've just got to be able to deploy some staff resources, whether they be voluntary organizations or public sector. In any event, we see that last year we made quantum leaps forward. We'll let that siren go. And we intend to keep going at this until we have hit all parts of the state and saturated our farmers markets as much as possible. And then hopefully our only real challenges will be in making sure that our individual consumers give farmers markets a try. I'm going to turn it back to Lisa, I'm sorry, okay, at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. I think really some of those last points of the patience or perseverance that has been required to not give up, because this is an incredibly powerful opportunity for both economic development and healthy food access for those who need it in our state. So thank you to you and your team and to CFMA and all the many partners who've been involved in that. The one piece that you didn't get to say, because you are a state employee, but I can say, is that we need Farm Bill advocacy. We've got to protect SNAP or we won't even have this conversation. So I do encourage folks to look at frac.org. It's a great site to learn more about how you might get involved in advocacy to support SNAP. It is another area where those of you who've been on calls before have heard me say this before, as we keep waiting for the right Farm Bill and we keep not having it, we have to persevere. We can't stop speaking up. So I will stop though for a minute and turn over to Dawn Thillmany as our next speaker, who will share the second issue brief that we have for today. Dawn has been an advisor to the council, I think predating the existence of the council, and has recently joined it as a participating member. So we are thrilled to have her expertise today as well. She's a professor and an agribusiness extension economist with Colorado State University. She co-leads the CSU Food Systems team and the Colorado Building Farmers Program, and also serves on national boards with the USDA, the National Agricultural and Rural Development Center, and the American Applied Economics Association. She runs circles around us with her smarts in this area. So we are thrilled to introduce Dawn to you.
Well, that's a tough introduction to live up to, but
oh, come on.
I don't know if I'll be running circles today, but I will probably talk too fast, and that's a warning to the group that if I need to clarify anything I speak about fairly rapidly or at 1,000-foot level where you'd like to know the 100-foot level, please tell me. And similar to the issue we just heard about, there is also a whole issue brief developed on the talking points I'll cover briefly today that I encourage you to take a look at if you want clarification on some of these points that I raised. So if we advance to the next slide, you'll see that what they highlight in this issue brief is really a set of megatrends that has led to the recommendations of how Colorado can best respond to them. So what we'll try to outline today is both the motivation and justification for why we see direct market technical assistance being of increasing need, and then some of the unique ways we can partner, again, with some key organizations in the state, and I represent one of them, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to let those direct markets grow and be as healthy as possible. So if we go to the next slide, I do encourage you to go read the brief at the same site as the brief we just talked about. What really motivated this issue brief was that nationwide there's a marked rise in direct markets in agriculture, and it isn't unique to Colorado. Across the country, we're really seeing it as a re-engagement of consumers and wanting to be reconnected with their food sources, their farmers. We're finally at a point where people are more than one generation away from having someone in their family who is directly related to farming and food production. And so it's somewhat surprisingly turned into consumers really, as they learn more about their food sources and production, wanting to find ways to support it. And they see direct markets as one way to close the gap of what were becoming very long supply chains and a disconnect into re-engaging. And what we've been encouraging producers to do is, at the same time we had seen the production and supply side move to almost too much of one model, which was a very efficient, very capital intensive, and very effective way of providing food for a lot of people. But it provided a lot of barriers for people who might want to get into farming at a smaller scale or stay in a more local orientation. But this new direct market trend upwards has allowed a subset of producers who are interested in, instead of looking to exports or the national market, really be able to focus and integrate their production and marketing system to local markets and local customers. The problem is a whole bunch of organizations, but I can speak most confidently about the land grants, and in Colorado, that's Colorado State, had kind of moved to supporting mostly the model that was becoming more common, which is very technically efficient, large, capitalized production systems. So now when we've seen a subset of producers want to go back to a more integrated and locally focused markets, we're having to refocus and adjust the types of technical assistance we do, and we are not alone in this. I think a lot of agricultural organizations and the Department of Agriculture and a lot of our local USDA offices have seen the same need to retool. So if we move to the next slide, this led to some of the key issues that are highlighted in the issue brief. And one is the need for food and farming business development that has a set of new tools or adapted tools or refocused tools, because the strategies and models for these very locally oriented business models are very different than what, again, we'd keyed up in at least the land grant system at CSU. And again, our partners are feeling the same needs, so we often partner with them to try to close that gap. Even if we weren't looking at just direct markets, there's been a pretty significant paradigm shift in understanding best practices for food handling and safety, no matter the scale or orientation of agriculture. You've probably heard a lot about the Food Safety Modernization Act, and what I would say is that all scale and levels of agriculture are really feeling a need to kind of catch up with those regulations and make sure they're on top of complying with them. And this is just a nice opportunity, because probably the strategies that are effective for the big producers are going to be different than the ones for the smaller direct producers. And so this policy brief generally motivates the need for not forgetting the fact that different models of agriculture will have to comply with those regulations differently. And beyond the big national federal legislation that's probably been in front of all of you, we also know that our state also took on some cottage food regulations that we have been very actively engaged in trying to help people address in their own businesses as well. And then finally, the one that connects possibly best with the last issue brief we just heard about is market access and infrastructure. Similar to how we weren't really as prepared as we could have been on the technical assistance side to help people with their new models of food marketing, we also had our infrastructure restructuring over the last 100 years to really serve a very particular set of supply chains. And as we've seen supply chains change and adapt to supporting both export markets and national markets and now local direct markets, sometimes we have to rethink if we have the right types of processing, storage, retailing assets in place. So we also see a need to actually help some of the private and public enterprises that are addressing market access and infrastructure by helping them with everything from feasibility to best models to new governance structures. So those are really some of the key issues that the brief highlights. And if we go to the next slide, we just want to reinforce again that these are all being very, very much so driven by what's happening in the marketplace. Beyond the national statistics, in almost every regard, Colorado is changing and growing in this dimension faster than the national market. The last study we did out of CSU had us growing 30% in direct sales between the 2002 and 2007 census. The 2012 Ag Census, as they happen every 5 years, is not out yet, but we don't expect any slowing in that growth at all, and in fact expect that number to be bigger over this past 5 years. When we could last measure it, we were outpacing the national average in direct market sales by a magnitude of 2, so we're going about twice as fast as the country on average. The most recent statistics that are put out show that we have farm to school growing across the country, and we were fortunate enough to work with one of the school districts here in Colorado on a master's thesis and found that if we can get farm to school strong and growing, that it may help to keep as much as 30% of the economic activity related to food purchases more locally or at least state level derived than if we stick with the more traditional model of food procurement with schools. And then finally, the one thing a lot of people don't think about, but we found really good evidence that there's a lot of ag and food-based tourism that's happening in the state to complement some of the tourism that's maybe more high profile, particularly skiing. But we last time we measured, and that was quite a few years ago, we estimated there was about $2 billion worth of food and ag tourism happening as well. And that is primarily also with producers who have a direct and local market orientation. So that leads us to our next slide, where we talk about what this means for what's going on in our state in particular. Because we've continued to get more and more calls and have more interesting questions and projects pop up, CSU about 10 years ago developed a local food systems team, which evolved into being a more broadly focused food systems team, because it also deals with a set of food producers who are looking at national markets as well. But the things we've done in response here at CSU, almost always with partners, and I've mentioned some of them already, is we've developed a Building Farmers short course, which is a kind of business planning short course for people who have done one of two things. They've either started a farm with a direct market orientation, or they were an existing farm who, because their business model wasn't working for them, they redirected to focusing their energy on direct markets. My colleague, Martha Sullins, started doing a farmers market price reporting project so that we had better information about what people were paying in markets. That helps the consumers who are trying to budget or look at where they can get the most affordable offerings, and it helps the producers who are trying to plan and decide what their business strategy can be. We've been with partners in our team that are in the food science and human nutrition department, looking at the food safety implications of changing markets. And to a lesser degree, we really want to invest more, but trying to look at the connections between markets and health outcomes. We have food stamp nutrition education that happens out of CSU and another work team of Colorado State University, and they've been around a long time, but they've just really recently started redirecting people to one of their options for better access to healthy foods is direct markets. We have a student looking at health outcomes and choices that students are making in the lunchrooms in the farm-to-school programs, and those again are from other parts of our team and with other partners that CSU works with. And then finally, two products that are out there that are partnerships with the Colorado Department of Agriculture and that I encourage you to visit are Colorado Farm to Market, where a team of people put together all of the regulations and codes that people should abide by. What became interesting as people looked at local markets is, even though they might be direct marketing in only Colorado, they might be doing it in 5 different counties or 10 different municipalities, and all of them might have different codes and regulations to abide by. So Colorado Farm to Market is kind of like a one-stop shop where you can look by product, by location you're going to be marketing into, and get the best information available about how best to fit the culture and regulatory requirements of those markets. And then finally, Colorado Market Maker, where we have tried to make a one-stop shop for all food, ag, agritourism, wine, and farm-to-school and food bank. Anyone who touches kind of the food and ag system can have a profile there for free. We're one of the most active sites in the country. There's 20 other states that have the same program that is based out of Illinois. And we've been very proud of it being a really great place to find out what's going on in the food system that is Colorado. And I encourage you to go view it if you have not visited before. So to the next slide. The future we see is that we have been really fortunate to have great partners approach us and compete for some great grant funds to build some of this capacity I just mentioned. What makes us nervous at CSU is that they're kind of built on shifting sands. There's a couple of people and personnel who are very committed to this, but we know that if we had not been so lucky as to get the grants we did to build some of these, that half of what was just mentioned would not be there. And so we worry that without more stable staffing that's not dependent on soft funds and us obtaining grants, that we won't even be able to maintain our current resources, and we certainly won't be able to respond to the emerging issues that continue to move and shift and change in the state, and it's a very active state. So we do feel like we've had a strong record in leveraging the positions we do have and bringing new money to Colorado to serve these markets, but again, we get a little nervous that some year we're not going to compete and people are going to be left disappointed with us for not being able to perform at the level we've been trying to. So I guess we mostly were really encouraged when the council came to us saying that in their listening sessions, people really supported CSU as a strong partner. And when they asked us what that meant to us, I guess we agreed with them when we felt like it was really that we didn't know that we really had the critical mass that's really needed and that we see in our partner states who are able to do even more than we've been able to do. And we're very proud of what we do, and it's only because we have great partners. But we do feel like we could do 50 or 100% more and still not meet all the needs of our state. So with that, I guess I'll wrap up, and I appreciate the time to kind of talk about how Colorado State University particularly sees this, but know that when I was talking today, I'm talking for a whole team of people I work with and a whole bunch of partners who've been really kind to support us and engage us however they can. So I think I'm turning it back to Lisa or Ron.
Yep, thank you, John. That was great, and I hope that you didn't just create a whole bunch more work for yourself as we continue to grow the demand for you and the incredible people that are out there. I am going to turn it over to Ron now, and he's going to wrap us up with some more things about the Food Systems Advisory Council overall, and then we'll get a chance to start answering some of your questions.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Julie and Dawn, for leading up this effort. Some great work produced in these two issue briefs, and I do think that it will really get us started in a dialogue about these particular issues. I just want to very, very briefly note some recommendations from the two issue briefs with regard to opportunities for enhancing SNAP at farmers markets. Again, I'm not going to go through any of these recommendations in detail, and instead I'll refer you to the issue briefs themselves on our website. But I do just want to point out that we're looking at some more resources through FTE, both at CDHS as well as some support at the Farmers Market Association. And we're looking at outreach, looking at education, and looking at advocacy in these areas as well. We'd like to see more EBT equipment at no cost to agricultural businesses, increase marketing and promotion of EBTs. All in hopes that we can see better, more effective, and more efficient use of the EBT technology, and therefore a more effective, efficient, and greater use of SNAP benefits at these farmers markets. So, once again, Julie, thanks for your work on this and for leading this effort. I think it was a great product. Now, with regard to opportunities for enhancing direct market technical assistance, again, I think that Dawn has identified these issues and gone over them, and we're looking at expanding the Colorado Building Farmers Program, which seems to be a very effective an FTE position at the CSUE, at the extension, and just general support for business development and the ability to provide more technical assistance. Again, we've seen that need, we've heard that need, and we think that these are some ideals that will help get us there. But what happens next? And let me just very, very quickly mention that the idea of creating these issue briefs wasn't just to create a product and then walk away from them. We want to engage as a council the relevant parties our state legislature and the relevant agencies and other groups to work with them and to have a discussion about the issues we've identified. We either have or will be very soon delivering the 2 issue briefs to the state legislature. I've already had a discussion with members of both the House and Senate Ag committees, and they have invited me to participate in a hearing on the Food Systems Advisory Council in February, at which time I will also present these issue briefs to them and hopefully have a good discussion about why we identified these as issues, as well as the recommendations that we came up with. And hopefully over time, we're going to be talking to and working with our stakeholders around the state and other folks also about engaging their local representatives to help us in this effort to have a constructive dialogue with the relevant folks. Now, another part of what happens next is we've done these 2 issue briefs, but we're going to continue looking for opportunities, looking for issues. And the best way that we can follow a particular direction and pursue a particular issue is going to come from a lot of you, a lot of our participants. You guys are out there in the field. You're the ones who are struggling with a lot of these issues and trying to either enter direct markets or help expand into direct markets. And you're the ones who see some of these things on a daily basis and can help guide us in where we should turn next, what issues should we pursue. And one of the ways we would like you to give us feedback as well as ideas and suggestions is on our webpage. We have an issue submittal form, and you can go to that, give us some ideas, tell us where you think there are barriers, tell us where you find difficulties every day, and give us an opportunity to pursue those. That's one way. And we've already received a couple of submissions, and we're very grateful for those. Another way that you can help us is to participate in our quarterly meetings. We do meet quarterly, and we're going to be posting the information as to the time and location and dates of those meetings. But in the slide in front of you there, you should see that our next meeting is January the 22nd. From 1:30 to 4:30. I don't think we have a location established yet, but we'll be getting that information out very shortly. We'll be following up that with a meeting on May the 8th, September the 3rd, and then December the 10th. So those are our 4 scheduled quarterly meetings. And your participation, if any of you can attend, these are public meetings, would be very helpful in guiding us and directing us in the types of things that we should be considering. As I said earlier, I think the members of the state legislature see the council as a bridge between them and a lot of the groups and coalitions around the state. And the legislature really is looking to us to help bring to them issues. And you're the ones that can help us in that endeavor. So again, I want to thank everyone for being part of this discussion today and participating with us. We think that we've started down the right path, and I think with your help and participation and guidance, we're going to be able to provide a lot of useful information, ideas, and recommendations to the state legislature, to state agencies, and others. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Lisa. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Ron, and thank you to Don and Julie. I think that was extremely informative, particularly based on the challenging questions and the number of questions that have been submitted. So we appreciate that. We are going to do our best to answer them right here. One of the things that you may have caught on to that some of our speakers alluded to, the number of partners that they have within their own organizations and outside that are so key to doing this work. So in some cases, we may need to refer to some others and get back to you, and we would include that in some follow-up. So with that, with that disclaimer, I will start with asking the first question, and I think I'm going to look to Julie to answer first. And we also have Wendy Peters-Muschetti on the phone, who is a food systems consultant to both LiveWell Colorado and staff the Food Systems Advisory Council. So in some cases, she may be prepared to help answer as well. So the first question, are you utilizing the USDA Agriculture Marketing Services Program for farmers market marketing? One of the key criteria for funding has been the implementation of the EBT systems for SNAP.
This is Julie, and I'm afraid that I'm going to start with, I can't answer that question. I know that Scott Barnett, who's the manager of our EBT program, and his colleague Trish Heath are listening in. I don't know if they have any way to answer by just typing in, but if not, I will make sure that we get back and provide the answer in writing afterward.
Okay, so we'll watch for a response if they're able to answer, if Scott or Trish are able to answer, otherwise we will follow up on that one. The second one I will give a stab at, a question wondering if the council is aware of and working with the Mile High Business Alliance on their local food efforts in the state. So Wendy and I in particular are very familiar with the Mile High Business Alliance and have participated with them some. Their local food work has really been more recent than the listening sessions that we had gone out and done on economic development. So the timing for that, we also focused outside of Denver Metro. So we are aware of them. We have not connected directly, but I'm hoping maybe they're on the phone and we'll continue to find opportunities to connect our work. Okay. The next question, Julie says she's got an answer. Yeah. How long will the extension last that provides SNAP equipment in markets?
So if Scott, again, will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding it will go through September 30, which is the end of this next federal fiscal year.
Great, thank you. Again, advocacy for the Farm Bill. Thank you for putting on this webinar. I'm in Manitou Springs. I'm part of a group of community members opening a local first grocer here in our town, which currently has no fresh food access within town limits. Our goal is to support local farmers, small batch producers, and provide a point of sale for these food growers and producers that keeps our food dollars here in Manitou Springs. We plan to accept SNAP, and we're working on this double coupon thing. How can we get access to the coupon program for our shoppers? Julie?
Well, I have an answer, but it's not one that I particularly want. According to Scott, there is no current grant program statewide for double coupon, but we have asked Food and Nutrition Services to see if they can help us do this, maybe even partner with some local private vendors. And our state staff, again, Scott and Trish, will take the lead on at least trying to get information about this. That doesn't mean that we will write the grant proposal, but we certainly are going to see what we can do to figure out if there's a statewide effort that could be created.
Great, thank you. I'm also going to make a plug for Denver Urban Gardens, who have worked with, I believe it's Wholesome Wave, and have been able to bring some of those programs in some limited places within Colorado. I don't know what their status is right now, but you might look up Denver Urban Gardens and Shannon Spurlock as somebody to talk to more. You're welcome, Shannon. So I'm trying to see where we're next. Okay, another related question. We are also trying to figure out how we can have a farmer's market cart across the street from the store, which will allow cottage food folks to sell their local products directly to community members. Do you see any problems with this plan? And I don't know if Dawn or Julie or Wendy have an answer to that. I think it says local regulatory, but I'll kick it back to you guys.
This is Dawn, and the permission to have a food cart would be a local regulatory question. And again, at Colorado Farm to Market, you can at least start by looking at what that county or city has to say about food carts. And usually the public health department has some set of requirements. It's just more or less rigorous depending where you are. In terms of cottage foods in that context, I don't think there's anything you normally wouldn't have to address with cottage foods that you had to address differently with the food cart. Although I don't know that we've actually looked at this, but realize that with cottage foods there is a requirement to go through there was a more rigorous need to go through some training. They still recommend some amount of training, although they've made it more applicable and relevant, and that you still do need to have some minor licensing, again, depending on where you are. And, I guess the other thing I would say is, like, it's really important for you to talk to who is providing you insurance coverage. The one kind of subtle, hidden thing people didn't think about is that even if the law requires cottage foods, if you still need to get an insurance policy, and we have had a couple of providers in Colorado step up and be willing to cover cottage foods, you still do need a policy to make sure you're protected if something happens with something that someone eats from that food cart. So I guess that the 3 steps are, make sure you look at what the just general cottage food requirements are, and those are at Colorado Farm to Market. Look at what the requirements are for food carts, and that's at Colorado Farm to Market. And third, make sure to have a good talk with your insurance company about how they might handle cottage foods differently.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. We also have a comment related to the first question from Manitou Springs, which is a suggestion to connect with Pikes Peak Urban Gardens in Colorado Springs, so a more local group. So thank you for that recommendation from another Julie.
And this is Dawn, and what I would say is that the community, that community foundation down there, I forget its exact name, in the Colorado Springs area, is very well organized and has been very open to local food concepts. So even if you don't get the answer you want from a Wholesome Wave, the chances that if you had a good proposal, showed evidence from how that double coupon program has worked for Denver Urban Gardens, the chance that you could get them to at least have a good conversation with you about whether that's something they would support, I bet you'd get a good positive response. So make sure to look into your as local a foundation as you can, and I just know the one down in the Colorado Springs region has been looking at local and direct foods for quite a while.
Great. Well, you got a great, good idea, thanks, from the person who asked that question, so thank you. See, another question. Are there any groups or resources available about the total food needs of the Colorado market? Okay, Dawn, does that make sense?
This is Dawn again. One thing we liked about the Colorado Market Maker site, we mostly promote it as being a directory of finding people, but there is a Research Your Market section of that site where it shows you by county, even all the way down to by census tract, how much our households are spending on every category of food you can imagine. And so sometimes when we do a business plan with people, we'll use that as a place to start of what are all the food dollars in our community, and then we'll start making estimates of what percentage might be looking. Our best guess right now is that 10 to 15% possibly in the most in the markets where we know there's good infrastructure, good farmers markets, lots of CSAs, we think maybe 10 to 15% of produce particularly is probably purchased in season at direct markets. So if you go and look at that tool, look at your county or your city, you can kind of start doing a back-of-the-envelope calculation about what might be possible. But it also just has everything that Coloradans are spending on every category of food as well, and that was all compiled from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where they collect that to make our consumer price indices and stuff. So it's a pretty big wealth of information, but it can overwhelm you quick. And again, that's where we end up answering a lot of questions or kind of teach more about how to do that in workshops. But if you want to connect with me, if you go to that and it's dizzying to you, I'm happy to talk you through it.
Great. So to confirm, that was the Colorado Market Maker?
Yeah, Colorado Market Maker, and instead of looking for a producer, there's a tab at the top of it that says research. I think it's called Research Your Market or Market Research, and it has tabs you can pull down to look at the demographics, food purchase behavior, and all kinds of things about either a county or a census tract.
Great. Thank you again. Well, we have gotten to the end of our time. I think we have come close to answering every question, and we will send a follow-up message that has links to the key resources, including that Colorado Market Maker, to the Food Systems Advisory Council website. And I do want to make a plug that we have already received one submittal of another issue idea to pursue that will be brought forward to the council later next year. So this is a very real tool, a very real resource, and it will only be as good as the engagement by all of you on the phone and your partners and friends. So thank you again. I think our next slide has the speaker contact, so you'll have that again. And then another resource for you that I believe will have links to everything we've talked about as well is the Food Systems Toolbox of LiveWell Colorado, which is www.livewellcolorado.org/foodsystems. And last of all, thank you again for joining this call, and we look forward to our first call at some point early in 2014. We will be doing a webinar on increasing fresh, healthy options in early childhood settings. So thank you again, and have a wonderful holiday season. Bye-bye.